Welcome to Prophets of Babel with your host, Janine. Today we are reading the book of Rashan and the second half of the book of Terath. Chapter 13. Now when the men of God had come again, Terath did account for all that had transpired, and did seek Johann to inquire of the Lord on his behalf. And it came to pass that Johann did inquire of the Lord, and he did say that Terath, thy wife, has conspired against thee, and has consulted with evil spirits. And now this grieved Terath, for he had love for his wife, and had pity on her. Now Dora had determined to avenge herself on Artemis for his betrayal, and she did place charms in the closet in which he slept, and did administer a potion to him that would make him lethargic. Now when Terath returned and did find the woman beating the unfortunate servant, and he bade her to cease, and Doriah informed him that this lazy slave refused to work, and all he did was lay about in his closet, refusing to earn even the food he ate. And it came to pass that Terath did seek that Artemis was laying about, and would not get up, and he did chastise the young man. And Artemis did plead for forgiveness, and claimed to be sick. But because he did not look sick, Terath sent him out to load the wagon. And in this Artemis did take a long time. And when he returned, he went to his closet to rest. And Doriah said unto him, You lazy one, go out and feed the horses. And when he returned, she gave him another task, wherefore he would faint when he stood. And in all things she did point to his laziness, and complained against him to Terath, who was moved by her words. And Terath did consider placing his confidence in his slave over his wife. Now Johann did hear of the way that Terath did give an account for all the words of the men of God in their absence, and how she did lead the wealthy of Beth-shira in a discussion on law. Therefore Johann did seek of her that she would recount to him all that she had discussed with the men. And it came to pass that Terath did give an account of all their words, and Johann asked her, Do these words mean anything to you? And Terath expounded upon all the meaning of the words, as she understood them. And Johann was amazed, and proclaimed, Thou, O girl, have been given a grace by the Spirit of the Lord. Now because of Terath's unusual grasp of the law, and her sharp intellect, Johann did give her private instruction, and elaborate many things that were only discussed by a few. Wherefore she came to a rich understanding of all things divine. And she did inquire of Johann how to become a prophet, and how he came to communicate to the Lord. And he told her all things that he knew. Chapter 14. Now Terath was anxious to share all she knew with her brother Terath. Wherefore she did begin to tell him all that the prophet had spoken to her. And Terath did hear her words, and did listen with appreciation. Wherefore he came to know that his sister had been blessed with a certain grace in godly things. And from time to time he did hear his sister, and acknowledged that she had something to teach. But her sisters were not so graced, and neither did Gonet or any other sibling listen to the words she preached. Therefore she did keep them between her and Terath and Johann. And it came to pass that in some things Terath did ask his daughter, seeking understanding, that he did not have to ask the prophet directly. And when he spoke to the prophet, he spoke the words of Terath as his own words, and the prophet was impressed with his understanding. For all we know, the prophet knew who the words belonged to. Now Terath, being the patron of the prophets of the township of Beth-shira, Johann and Denome did persuade him to set up a mystery school. And it came to pass that Terath did set apart some land on his own estate, and entrusted the builders for the construction of the building. And all things planned thereby were according to the instruction of Johann, which he received from the Lord. And Doriah was furious of the waste, and she hexed the construction. That part of a wall fell on a laborer, that he died. Now this terrified everyone, and Terath repented of his desire, and called a halt to the construction. And it came to pass that Johann went before the Lord to inquire how they should proceed. And it came to pass that the Lord commanded him to continue the construction, but to bless the ground immediately, that no more catastrophes occur. And this appeased Terath, that he allowed construction to resume, and the ground was consecrated along with the efforts of the builders. And Dariah was again vexed, and went about placing evil charms on the ground, and reading evil prayers against the construction. But the power of the priesthood was stronger than her evil, and there were no more accidents. And it came to pass that Termer was also unhappy with the construction, saying, Did these men not also speak destruction upon the lands about Israel? And now you have given them land of your own inheritance, and financed a building for the teaching of evil prophecies? And Terath in all things honored his father and mother, and spoke not a word in answer. And Terath sent Artemish to work on the construction, doing all things that the builders required, and they reported that he was a lazy and a worthless slave. And Terath scolded Artemish, saying, How can you be lazy and do not work to be kept? Even my own sons and daughters do labor for their sustenance, and do all things I require as a merchant. Thou, who art a slave, do all you are commanded to do slothfully. Chapter 15. And it came to pass that the construction neared completion, and there was an auditorium and private rooms for group study therein. And also there was a dormitory and a kitchen, and it neared unto the simple utility of the monastery of Dosimer. And it came to pass that Dosimer and Denome and several others began to reside in the dormitory on the estate of Terath, and they continued to gather in the home of Terath for public instruction among the learned in the law of Beth Shira. And the school was officially opened for the study of the prophets, and the administration of the school took up a collection from the students for the administration of the school. And it came to pass that Dariah complained to Terath, saying, How is it that these men run a school upon thy lands, which in all things you have paid for, and the tuition collected are not reimbursed unto thee? And Terath said unto her, Woman, what is thy complaint? Hast thou gone hungry, or lacked a bed to lie upon, that thou begrudge my charity and dedication to God? And Dariah said, These men are not God, but support themselves by trafficking on the name of God. And it came to pass that Dariah continued to administer of her poisons, of the concoction of lethargy unto Artemish, and of mind control unto Terath, and began to taint the foods of the men of God in the kitchen of the school of the prophets with a potion of delirium and madness, that they would babble in confusion. And it came to pass that the students who partook of the evening meal did babble in confusion, and the men of God who gave instruction did also stumble in their words. And when the men who came late to the service in the home of Terath were incoherent and appeared drunken, Terath was bewildered, and would send Artemish unto Johann the prophet to come. But Artemish the slave was feeble and lethargic, and would not get up. Wherefore Terath called to him his son Terash, and his daughter Terathia, and said unto them, Go ye too, for Johann knows, and favors you. Tell him to come hither, to behold the evil befallen the school of prophets. And they went and returned with the prophet, who stood amazed at the incoherent babbling of all. And Johann the prophet affirmed that the people had been cursed by some evil, for it was the design of the evil one to hinder the school of the prophets. And he gathered the whole house together to pray. And since neither Johann nor any of the household of Terath had partaken of the tainted food of the school of prophets, they were not in a stupor. Wherefore Johann did speak to them, and assembled and lead all in prayer and meditation. And after the prayer and meditation, the people seemed to have regained some of their senses. And Johann took charge of all the meeting. And it was known among them that the synagogue was opposed to there being a school of the prophets. And they were appointed by them of the temple to teach the people. And the rabbis who taught in the synagogue were appointed of the order of Levites, and they claimed to have the authority to preach. And the people held faith in the prophets, and also any that claimed the ability to heal the sick. Wherefore the Levites did not forbid prophets from preaching unless the prophets spoke out against the temple and the priest. But there were many who had avoided them of the school forming in the home of Terath, because of what the priest had said. And though Terath was respected among the community, there was a division among them between those who said his patronage of the prophets was commendable and those who thought he was being taken advantage of. And with the sickness that took hold of the school, it was thought by some that the priest of Levi had cursed them. Chapter 16. Now the people in the school returned to their homes that night, and the following day the teachers of the school again partook of the food in the kitchen and again became ill and confused. And it was because of this that it was determined among them that the food was tainted, and by someone's hand. And for this cause they declared that there was an enemy among them. Wherefore they threw away all the food and employed one among them to protect the kitchen at all times. And when this thing was reported to Terath, he suspected Dariah because of what had been reported to him by Artemish. And it came to pass that Dariah was seen by their watch as she entered into the kitchen with food prepared by her, and she was questioned and said she desired to share food with the men of God. And the man allowed it, owing to her position as patroness of the school of the prophets. And Terath inquired as to her whereabouts upon her return, and she said that she had been out walking. And Terath went unto the school and learned the testimony of the student on watch, and brought back the food that she had left. Now Terath continued to watch Dariah without drawing her suspicion, and before long he caught her putting some potion into the food prepared for Artemish. And he said unto her, Woman, what is the meaning of this? Art thou poisoning my servant? And she said unto him, Nay, but he is weak and lazy, and I am administering a medicine to cure his ail, procured from the physicians. Now Terath did not believe her, and threatened that if she be telling a lie and causing mischief, he would move her out of the house. And she exclaimed upon her soul that there was no mischief, and that no such shame should come upon a daughter of Israel, especially a first wife of a husband, to be forced to live outside of the house. And now it came to pass that Terath commanded her to go nowhere near the food of anyone, nor to touch their drinks, nor to enter the kitchen. And he caused that his son should go and procure fresh food and administer it to Artemish, and within days he was healthy again. Now, for this cause, Terath repented of his treatment of Artemish, and for speaking evil unto him, calling him lazy, and Artemish endeavored to labor the harder to help the completion of the meeting hall of the school. And when the building was completed and dedicated, a ceremony was held in which Johann honored Terath for his generosity in constructing the school to study the law and the prophets. And it came to pass that Johann's regular audience from the marketplace now had a place to study and to contemplate, and also share communal meals. And they rejoiced, and the school was filled with people, and a spirit of wisdom and knowledge. And now, after this construction, the merchant Terath was not a wealthy man, nor rich, but he was honored. And Termer, his father, would that there be some kind of tax upon the school, that his son could regain on his patronage. Now Terath would that his sacrifice could be counted unto his accounts with the Lord Almighty, and he was content with the possessions he had left, which were much less. And on this Termer was displeased, and commanded him to give no more to anyone, for God had already accepted the offer of his life as a payment into his kingdom above. Chapter 17. Now the school being open to the public, and there being 100 students that gathered from all the lands round about to study daily, and also people from the community to gather in for worship on the 7th day and the first day of the week, the school became the rival of the synagogue. And it came to pass that the priest of the temple did send forth a letter unto them in Jerusalem to inquire of the matter. For they claimed that those of the school did not enter to make offerings in the temple, which was not the truth. Now the synagogue and the temple of Bethshira operated under the authority of the chief priest in Jerusalem, and they also sent a portion of the offerings collected to the main temple. And it was forbidden for any temple to exist in any lands round Israel without the authorization of the chief priest of the temple of Solomon. And one of the rabbis of the synagogue of Bethshira did come to the house of Terath to inquire if the school of study were operating as a temple. Now the rabbi was received by Dariah, the wife of Terath, and she complained all things that she esteemed would offend the rabbi. And it came to pass that the rabbi returned a wicked report back to the council and sent it on to Jerusalem. Now, when the council in Jerusalem had heard what an illegal temple was formed in opposition to the temple of God, they ordered it to be shut down and destroyed. And the priests of Jerusalem sent a detachment of soldiers with their orders back to the priests in Bethsheba and monies with which to buy the labor of those to destroy the temple. And some of the ones that were hired were also the contractors who had built the school, and they were curious indeed that it must now be unbuilt. Now, during this time, there was a tremendous fervor to learn the law and the words of the prophets, and it resulted in a greater enthusiasm of the people to worship, including the rites of the temple. And during this time of great success in preaching, the prophets also began to spend time in serious reflection and meditation in the Lord, and some began to receive revelation and prophecy. And in this time, Johann received words of coming trials and conflicts. Now the rabbis approached in the afternoon when there were fewer students, and they were accompanied by soldiers to keep the peace while they sacked the school and demolished the building. And Johann and the monks begged. They first explained why they were so ordered and denied there being a temple at all. Now the rabbis would not hear the prophets, but the soldiers commanded them to step aside. Now the students immediately raced to gather all the other students of the school to come immediately, notwithstanding the number of soldiers would prevent any uprising. And it came to pass that more and more of the students came, though they were still outnumbered by soldiers, and they came to show support for the school and plead with the rabbis to cause no harm to it. And the men hired had begun to carry out all the supplies within the school and all of the books. Now the leader of the council at Bethsheba was a rabbi by the name of Moses Levi, and he studied under Simeon ben Levi in Jerusalem and was a renowned scholar of the law. And it came to pass that Johann, who was known to Moses Levi, implored that he take counsel before taking further action. And Moses replied that counsel had been taken. And Johann implored that he commission an investigation of fact before causing harm to an innocent institution. And Moses Levi replied that all facts had been ascertained. Now this was a mystery to Johann, who asked who could have misreported the facts. Now Yaren, the magistrate, who was a fair judge in Israel, stepped forward and assured that no one would be judged or charged with a crime so long as the false temple was dismantled. And Johann, begging a hearing of fact and an opportunity of defense, now to this Yaren warned that a formal proceeding would lead to criminal charges of apostasy. And again, he promised that with the destruction of the building and no further nuisance, no one would be charged for their errors of judgment. But this did not dissuade Johann, who spent his life in the service of the Lord and answered to no one but God. And he called for a formal hearing and gave himself as the one in charge of the school. And it came to pass that the magistrate and the rabbis took counsel among themselves. Now the rabbis did not wish to harm anyone, nor did they look upon the teacher or the students of the school as wicked, but only misguided in their zeal. And again, Moses Levi advised Johann to quit his defense and allow the building to be dismantled. But if he persisted, they would make of him a warning of dissidence of the temple instead of the school. And Johann said, I must first hear the charges and what you think the crimes are, so that I can answer them. If you will not discuss them openly here, then we must hold a hearing. Now by this time, Terath had come and begged to speak to Moses Levi, to speak to and Yaren, the magistrate. And Terath had been a generous supporter of the temple. His whole life and his devout family had always been seen there. Wherefore the temple priests and rabbis had no mind to disregard or punish him. And it came to pass that Moses Levi did say unto Terath, Behold, this man hath mistaken in leading you away from the temple to worship at a location unknown to God. Perhaps he hath been this edifice upon your own property, and you are unaware of his intent. Wherefore you need not fear being charged with him. And Terath responded that he knew what transpired within, and that it was a school of study only. Now Moses Levi did say unto Terath that the temple of Bethsheba was authorized as a temple, and its attached prayer house is the authorized meeting place for the synagogue to study the law. Now that you tell me that you are fully aware of what transpires within, it is becoming more difficult for me to excuse you in the matter. I pray you say no more, but let this mistake be removed. Now Terath was confused in his heart and uncertain, for the prophet Johann had taught his family and become dear to his heart, and also he had foretold things unknowable, and also raised him from his sick bed. And it came to pass that Terath said no more in defense, but defied his father in making a financial contribution to the temple to show that they were not in opposition. And Moses Levi did say, "Of course I shall accept your offering as a sin offering, which will ensure that God does not hold you accountable for these errors of judgment." And Terath answered, saying, "Master, I am a simple merchant who loves the Lord, and I make offerings because of my love of the Lord and his temple priest, but I am not learned of what my sin is, which is why we seek to study the law in this school closer to our homes than the temple." Chapter 19. Now, after all the discussion had ceased, the magistrate called for the hearing to be held the following morning, and the captain was angry, for he sought to return with his men to Jerusalem. Now the soldiers took possession of the dormitory and the meeting hall and made preparations for sleep. And the captain, the rabbis, the priest, and the judge were accommodated in the home of Terath. Now the home of Terath was a large house with many improvements, for he had been a successful merchant, but the furnishings had become sparse, for Dariah, his wife, had sold much and offered much to the wise women, and again the slave Artemis had cost much. And when business was poor during the ailment of Terath, his father caused the much be sold to acquire new merchandise. And when those who regarded Terath with esteem did take note of the barrenness of his house, they did wonder and speak amongst themselves. And they did suppose that his business was not going well, and they did not fear the loss of his patronage at their temple any more. Nevertheless, they did treat him with respect for his hospitality, and Johann was still on house arrest pending the trial. Terithia, seeing all this transpire, did take her brother Terash and did begin praying with fervent prayer on behalf of Johann and the school. And in all these things Dariah did rejoice to be rid of the school and the prophets, and that her husband would become again a merchant of trade. And it came to pass that on the morning a recorder was sent for that all things that transpired under the office of the magistrate could be documented. And Moses Levi charged Johann the prophet with sedition against the temple and the priesthood, and secondly, setting up a false temple of worship. And speaking for his defense was Dosimer, who was an Israelite, and he asked for the proof of the charge. And Moses Levi said that in the school was an altar for the worship of God, which demonstrated that it was not only a house of study, but a house of worship. Now Dosimer countered that in many homes in Israel also there are altars and tabernacles for the keeping of incense and objects of worship, and this is not forbidden in the law. And the inmates of the school dormitory made of the school their home, and therefore may also have an altar in their home for their home worship. And Yarin said that an altar alone could not condemn the accused, but this reason did not clear him of his charges. Then said Moses Levi, "This man's worship service compete with the temple and draw away God's people from worshiping in his holy edifice." Now Dosimer took counsel among his friends and introduced those who were students of the school and also worshiped regularly as the temple and synagogue, and they numbered 30. Moreover, they testified that at no time did those of the school dissuade a temple attendance. Then Moses Levi presented a list of apostate teachings he alleged were taught in the school. Now student after student was questioned who denied the accusations, and the magistrate called for witnesses, and Moses Levi called for the daughter of Terath by name of Terithia, who according to her mother can remember all things she hears. And surprise went through the assembly, for a young girl could hardly be an accredited witness. Nevertheless, the judge allowed it. Chapter 20. Now Dariah feared greatly because she did not expect the statements she gave to the rabbi to be verified on record. Therefore, she pulled Terithia aside before entering the assembly and bade her to lie. Now Terithia was sore afraid, for this was an impossible thing for her mother to ask of her, and also she was bound to be obedient. Wherefore she became ill, and would that she die on the spot rather than choose. And Terithia begged her mother not to ask her to lie, for she did not know how, and could not do so before God, lest she imperil her soul. Now Dariah said unto her, Girl, know ye not that it was for the salvation of our family that I gave the false report unto the rabbi, that they would have cause to remove the school and save your father from ruin by giving all to these men? And seeing how I did it for you and for your father, how can you reveal it to the magistrate and the priests of the temple and bring ruin and dishonor to your whole household and bring the wrath of the magistrate upon your own mother? And have not I sought to your needs since but a babe in my arms, and also cared for your mother and siblings? Have ye not enjoyed all good things in this life because I kept your father upon the path of wisdom? Now would you see me punished, and the mistress of this respected household disgraced forever, and put from the synagogue, that my soul even be lost from heaven? Now Terithia wept in the agony of her soul, and in the midst of weeping she was called to present herself before the magistrate and the assembly. Now Moses Levi, who was about to ask her to give an account of all she heard from Johann, paused to ask if she had been weeping, and also noted that she looked pale and unwell, for she could not hide her distress. And she said not a word, but sat in turmoil and silent prayer. And Moses Levi asked her again, saying, Do you feel well, child? And the magistrate commanded her to speak, and she began speaking. Master, I am in distress, for there are serious charges discussed, of which my mind cannot discern. And Moses Levi said unto her, Fear not, for the weight of these matters bears not upon your shoulders, but is a matter of the magistrate and those assembled. We need only your recollections of the things taught by Johann the prophet. To this again the girl sat silent. Again Moses Levi asked her to recount what was spoken by the accused. And when again she could answer nothing, he said, Can't you remember? Now one stood up, who was of the merchants that heard her speak, and he said, She can remember, for I heard her give an account of the prophet's words from memory, as if she were reading from a scroll. Now several others agreed, such that the magistrate desired to hear her speak for himself, as the men described, wherefore he commanded her to speak. And also Johann wished her to speak, and her father also, wherefore they all beckoned her to speak. And again Moses Levi told her to not be afraid, but only speak the truth. Now she began to speak the truth as she recalled the words of the prophet, and they were the words that others had given. And when she finished, Moses Levi asked her if she ever heard the man speak out against the temple priest, or if he made animal offerings upon the altar of the school. And Terithia looked upon the face of Johann, could not lie to condemn him, and she said nay. Chapter 21. Now a roar went through the room, and the magistrate called for silence. And Moses Levi looked angered and said, Girl, your mother has declared that she heard as much from your very lips. Are you lying to this council? And again he said, Thou mayest have sympathy for the accused to lie to spare him punishment, but in protecting an apostate from punishment, thou shalt take his sins upon thyself before God, and be punished everlastingly. Dost thou wish to suffer this? And Terithia cried, Nay, but I lie not. And Moses Levi said, Then how camest this report by thy mother? Is she then the liar? And Terithia cried out, saying, Nay, nay, but I am the liar, for I lied unto my mother. And now all of those assembled were in shock of the treachery of a little one. And Moses Levi asked why she would lie unto thy mother and give false reports against men of God, and how can we trust thee now? And Terithia wept bitterly and said, I wanted my father to return home and not spend so much time with the holy men, wherefore I lied unto my mother that she might persuade him thus. And I am sorry for my dishonesty and would be excused as a witness. that I not endanger any other with my false testimonies. And it came to pass that Moses, Levi, and the magistrate excused the girl, and her father looked upon her with shame, and she fled from before the assembly. Now those from the temple took time to counsel among themselves, and also those of the school were given time to discuss among themselves. All were ashamed at the false charges brought on by the girl, but they were hopeful that the charges would not be upheld without witnesses. And it came to pass that the magistrate again took his seat and ordered the scribe to begin recording. And the magistrate asked Moses, Levi, to present any further evidence. And it came to pass that they brought out the scrolls taken from the school, and among them were the prophets and the books of Moses, the lawgiver. And Moses, Levi said, Behold, the books that are studied in the school, which are kept by those who need not the Levites and the rabbis of the temple. Now Dosimer said that there was no law against books of study. Then Moses, Levi presented a rubbing of the book of the law, saying, It is forbidden for any but the priest to possess the book of the law of the Lord and to store it outside of the temple. The possession of the law demonstrates the desire of the accused to rid themselves of the need of the temple and authorities. But because of this, those who were in defense of Johann greatly feared, for this circumstance was unheard of, and they knew not what those in authority would do. And again, Moses Levi questioned, where was this illegal copy obtained? Now, Deneme, the Samaritan, had remained quiet for fear of causing harm by association, he being a Samaritan. But at this, he stood up and declared that it belonged to him. Chapter 22. Now, the Samaritans have their own temples and prayer houses, and have maintained their own copies of sacred writings apart from those of Jerusalem since ancient time. And also, the books of the Samaritans often differ in reading from the authorized books kept by them in Jerusalem, and this was tolerated because they were Samaritans. The Samaritans were not known to possess the book of the law, but only a corrupted Pentateuch and some other books of prophecy and psalms. And Moses Levi asked this Samaritan to state his name and answer for why he went about with the most holy book of God. And it came to pass that Deneme answered, saying, I am Deneme, son of Denever, and I descend from the fathers through the line of Ishmael. And I have been a traveling teacher of the law for this many years, having been moved upon by the Spirit of God to be in service, taking a vow of poverty. Wherefore I am a traveling mendicant, earning my daily bread by preaching the law to any who pass by. Now I have no desire to counter the temple, nor do I claim to be a Levite, but I seek only to serve the Spirit as a reminder to the hearts of men to walk uprightly within the law. Now Moses Levi asked Deneme, Did you give this book of law unto the prophet Johann? And he saith, Nay, but it is my scroll, and I shall take it with me and depart into Samaria. Not so, saith Moses Levi, for thou hast stolen it, or paid someone to steal it. For this is a rubbing from the very plates that lie under guard in Jerusalem, and not some book kept from ancient Samaritans. Tell us where you got it, and lie not, for thou shalt be charged along with the accused and stoned together. Dosimer answering, saying, Good master, would you forbid the Samaritans, thy brethren, from keeping the law of Moses? Now they are not welcome in your synagogues, and if they are allowed, they are not welcome to speak or converse on topics of the law. Therefore, to study and keep the law, they must possess it, and they do this to honor God and not themselves. Wherefore is the fault for possessing the law, since they can in no other way keep the command of heaven? And Moses Levi answered, saying, The plight of the Samaritans is not our concern. The Levites are the rightful guardians of the law, and someone has stolen access to that which is ours to protect. And again Moses Levi demanded account for the book. And Deneme answered and said unto Moses Levi, I have acquired it through my ministry in the lands of the east, and have not stolen it, or paid anyone to steal it. But I followed and studied under my master Dululah and taught the law for many years. And when he died, the scroll became mine. I cannot say from where he obtained it, nor can I ask him how. And also, my Lord, it is the only thing I prize in life. For the teaching of the law is my calling from the Lord. Then Moses Levi said unto Deneme, Then I am certain the Lord shall provide you another copy. This one shall remain in the temple of Bethsheba by authority of the chief priest of Jerusalem. Now because of this, Yaren, the magistrate, was presented with a difficult decision, for the school was not proven to operate as a temple outside the authority of Jerusalem, but the presence of the forbidden book has shown them not to be innocent of mischief. And Moses Levi pled that the order be given to the destruction of the school because of the book, instead of punishing Johann, who appeared innocent. Now some of the rabbis urged the court to flog the feet of Deneme for his defilement of the law. But Moses Levi said, No threat or harm from a poor mendicant Samaritan, nor any benefit from his suffering. And Dosimer pled the magistrate release both men because the cause of the only nuisance had been relieved with the taking of the book, which nuisance was merely that a poor mendicant inherited the book from his master when he died. And this also was the only nuisance of the school of study, derived only from the temporary lodging of the same Samaritan mendicant. Therefore, it too should be restored to the possession of those who live and study there now, that all things were in harmony with the temple and synagogue. And after deliberating, they made Deneme swear that he knew of no other copies of the law, and they released them both and restored the school. Chapter 23. Now the students of the school rejoiced to be restored, though they mourned the loss of the law scroll. And it came to pass that Terath was confronted by Dariah, who said unto him, See what trouble these men have caused, bringing the authorities down upon our house and putting us all in the midst of controversy. And Terath responded that justice of heaven had prevailed and made its will known. Then he sought all his house for Terethia, and she was not found. And it came to pass that the captain returned to the dormitory to retrieve his soldiers, and behold, they were found in a stupor and babbling in tongues, and responded to no commands, wherefore all was chaos. And the rabbis and priests also came, saying, What is the meaning of this? And no one could answer. And once came accusing Johann the prophet, saying, What hast thou done to the soldiers of Israel? And the prophet replied, Nothing have I done, but if God hath done something, then inquire of him. And the people feared, and the priest and the rabbis returned to the temple, and the captain with them. Now the men of God took the soldiers with them into the lecture hall, and sat them down upon the cushions, and gave soothing words. And they also gave unto them untainted food and soft wine. And the men prayed over them and reassured them, and by they returned to their wits. And they sent them back to the temple to find their captain, giving them untainted provisions and blessing them with prayers. And the men returned, saying that a curse had come upon them all suddenly, but the men of God restored them with prayers and blessings and soothing words. Now this report unsettled the administration of the temple, and they commanded no man to speak of it. And also this report unsettled Terath, and he confronted his wife, asking, Hast thou poisoned the army of Israel? For were this known, we would be executed for treason. And when she heard it, Dariah feared greatly for her many sins, and retreated to her room, not speaking or eating for 3 days. And when she emerged, she went unto the temple to pray in repentance. Now the girl, Terethia, was still lost, and no one knew where she was. And her brothers and sisters and all the house and all the school of the prophets searched for her throughout the countryside, and she was not to be found. And Terath wept and lamented the loss of his daughter, for he imagined that she had dried out in the desert while fleeing in shame. And he consulted with the prophet Johann, who took his petition to the Lord on her behalf. Now Johann did not eat for 3 days, and kept himself in prayer and communion with the Spirit, waiting on the Lord. And to the mind of Johann came the discernment that the girl had not spoken truthful before the magistrate, but falsely to protect her mother. Chapter 24. And it came to pass that because of the controversy over the school, the people of Bethshear were divided. The school had many supporters, but also many adversaries, and rumors of the illegal law scroll and the unauthorized sacrifices upon the altar prevailed. Now, because Terath had been in the center of the controversy, many of the people who engaged with him in business ceased to transact with him, and also he was not regarding his labors, but searching for his daughter, even along with everyone in his house. And it became known that there was some treachery in his household against the men of God, and that his daughter's dishonesty stood in the midst of it. Now she had been deemed to be a desirable woman and had not answered any proposal of marriage, but with the reports of her treachery she became a scandal, and because of this too did many avoid her father's business, for now all their honesty was in question. And it came to pass that the school of the prophets thrived, even as the house of Terath waned, and his father Termer could not repair the damage to his son's affairs. Now Terath could think of nothing other than his daughter, and he cared nothing for all he had until she was safe. And he cried out in his heart to the Lord, saying, "Have I not brought all these troubles upon me for thy sake?" And he began to give credence to the complaints of his wife. And he looked upon his slave Artemish and thought, "Have I suffered the loss of my daughter for the sake of a slave?" Now Artemish was unceasingly in his search for his master's daughter, and because of this, Terath took heart and allowed himself hope. And when the first wife, Dariah, emerged from her room and knew that the girl was lost these 3 days, she feared that she had killed the girl by bringing shame upon her. And she took refuge in the house of the Lord to pray and repent. And when Johann the prophet emerged from his consultation with the Lord, all who had returned from the search empty-handed prepared for what he would say. Now Johann had obtained a word of inspiration from the Lord, and he declared that the girl had gone south to the monastery of Dosimer to seek refuge, and even now sought to be hidden up to a life of prayer apart from the shame of her dishonesty. Now the father of Terathea rejoiced and sent Artemish to find her and bring her home, and also Dosimer prepared to depart, taking with him Denime and some others from his home monastery. And Artemish raced ahead, sparing not a moment. And Terath called all his family together and began to recount all that had transpired since he obtained the slave Artemish and then became ill. And he inquired of each of them to contribute what they knew to his understanding of events, which included the selling of property by Doriah to pay for the wise women of Togoth. For he perceived that she had obtained charms and amulets and potions from wise women and not prophets, and had dealt treacherously with him. Now he demanded answers, saying that Doriah, their mother, was under the spell of the wise women and must be kept from them for her own good. And Terash confessed that Terathea had sought out the prophet Johann on behalf of her father, and Gonet confessed that he was forbidden to seek the priest because Dariah was under the advice of the wise women. Now Terath asked him where went the money he gave him to offer at the temple. He would not answer, wherefore he pressed him again and again until he confessed that he spent it. Chapter 25. Now Gonet found his mother in the temple and told her all that had transpired, and she feared all the more, being cast out from the house of her husband. And the temple priests beheld her praying all day and looking weary, and said among themselves, "See this woman pray for the soul of her deceitful daughter?" Now they pitied her, but they also despised her because of all the trouble her family caused. And it came to pass that she overheard them speaking, and took her leave unto the region of Togoth, to consult again with the wise women, telling them that the whole town had turned against them, and the family is in ruin. Now she demanded that they repair this damage, for she said, "Everything I have done at thy bidding has made my problems worse. You must repair this damage." And it came to pass that Edna said unto Dariah, "Woman, did I not tell thee that all who curse must prepare for the curses to return?" And it came to pass that Dariah was stricken with fear and guilt, and said, "Surely I have suffered all the misfortune of my meddling, and there can be no more to suffer." And Edna said unto her, "Dost thou ask the fates, or tell them?" And she said, "Tell me if the girl is dead, whom I killed with shame." And Sephora, the daughter of Edna, consulted with her crystal ball, and said, "She lives." And it came to pass that Dariah returned unto her home, and Terath met her as she approached, and said, "Where hast thou been?" And Dariah replied that she had been to the temple. And Terath accused her, saying, "Thou hast spoken well, that thou hast been to the temple yesterday. But since then thou hast visited again the witches of Togath, who have placed heavy curses on me and thee and all our house." And he spoke all he knew, that she fell down to the earth with shame because of her guilt. And beyond cursing me with evil signs and omens, thou hast corrupted my heir, that he steals my money and spends it in frivolous living, while his father lies on his bed begging for the priest. And thou nearly condemned a man of God to death with dishonesty, and caused the school that I built for the God of Israel to be destroyed by lies. And now our daughter is lost and has been missing this many days. And because of this, I no more hold the respect and standing in the synagogue that I once held. And my son Gonad is not fit to succeed me as the heir to my estate. For from you has he learned treachery, deceit, theft, and corrupt living. Wherefore my first son, Terash, who bears my name, shall inherit. And Dariah wailed in anguish at the words. And as she looked up, behold, Artemish rode up with a letter from the Cenobites as at the monastery regarding Terethia. And Dariah exclaimed, "This is all your fault, for because of you my husband lost his mind, because of the worry of a slave, and turned his attention from his own business. Thou hast brought this family into the dust with thy misfortune." And it came to pass that Terath said unto her, "I would prefer a faithful servant to an unfaithful wife." And she remembered the words of the wise woman. Chapter 26. And all returned into the house to hear the news that Artemish bare regarding Terethia, and they left Dariah upon the threshold. The letter of Dosimer assured that the girl was alive and well and being cared for, and that she had fallen into grave illness, from which she is recovering under their administrations. And she was assured that they knew she said no such things unto her mother Dariah as she said unto the magistrate, and notwithstanding she said nothing in response, they proceeded to tell her her own mind, which was true. And they perceived that Dariah had bound her to lie unto the magistrate, which pained her soul nigh unto death. But the girl did not begin to feel restored until they assured her that all was forgiven, and Dariah would not be punished beyond that which God saw fit to let her have remorse for her crimes. And they all showed love unto Terethia and laid hands on her, blessing her in the name of the God of heaven, and she began to be well again. Now the letter also said that she was not ready to return, but wanted to spend some time in the monastery, learning of God and engaging in prayer. Now this was not all, but Denime, having lost the law scroll of which he rested his life and ministry, sought her assistance in recollecting the words of the law, that between the two of them they could write again the words of the book. And in this Terethia was delighted and rejoiced, and after many days reciting the law until it was complete, she returned unto the house of her father, and was restored. And Dariah removed herself from the house for a time, and dwelt in a cottage away from the school of the prophets on the other side of the house. And she spoke not with any but her own children for many days. And Terath's father and mother and brother returned to their own house to oversee their own affairs. And Terath spent more and more time in the school of the prophets, learning the ways of God. And it came to pass that the family settled all accounts, and Terath took over the merchandising on account of his father becoming a doctor of the law within the school he created. And Gonet assisted Terath in his business, and Terath came no more to see Dariah, but he did not divorce her because of the law. And he still saw his other two wives, making Vagonia his head wife, but he spent the majority of his time in the service of the Lord in the school of the prophets. And Denime returned with the law scroll that he and Terithia had recorded, and it was in all ways exactly as recorded in the rubbing from the plates owning to the memory of Terethia. And from this book, many other books of law were written and kept in Bethshira and in the monastery of Dosimer, and kept on the travels of Denime, and kept in the private library of Terethia. And Artemish was set free of servitude and remained with Terath, dwelling in the dormitory of the school of the prophets, and becoming a doctor of the law himself, and becoming a true friend of Terath. And because of his faithfulness, Terath adopted him as his son. And now there are not many records from this period, but these stories have been preserved by us, from which we justify the propriety of women speaking in the synagogue and teaching, and by which slaves are not to be kept, and by which castes should not be regarded. And we shall see that in subsequent years the hand of the Lord was manifest in these events in preparing the family of Terath to leave their home of Bethshira and journey in the wilderness, becoming a great community of people in reverence of the Lord. And I, Rashan, will give the rest of the history of Terath in the second book of Terath, and I make an end. Thank you for listening to the first book of Terath with me, Janine, your host, and Prophets of Babel.